All right, so module 7 is all going to be about threat hunting and intelligence, and determining what threat intelligence is. So does anybody remember what threat intelligence is at this point? No, slept for 7 weeks. It's like hibernating. All right. Well, this should be fun then. So, introduction to threat intelligence. It's going to be the critical aspect of your defense strategy aimed at identifying, assessing, and mitigating your potential threats, AKA, it's you having knowledge of all the threats that are out there. All right. So, this could be your information centralized data source. This could come from things like your logs, your network traffic, et cetera. Being able to do the analysis on it with correlation. And then your actual threat detection. This could be back to your EDRs, your XDRs, anything out on the outside, phishing attempts, that kind of stuff. But the whole idea behind threat intelligence is these IOCs. All right. And we talked about that one before. Those indicators of compromise are artifacts or patterns that indicate potential malicious activity. And that threat intelligence is going to help you in identifying them and then disseminating them, which can include things like IP addresses, domain names, file hashes, et cetera. A simple way of looking at it, it's an RSS feed of all the stuff that's going on live in the real world. All right, that's a simple purview of threat intelligence. There's obviously multiple layers of threat intelligence, but think of it as I'm having outside constant feed of information of all the threats that are going on out there in the world. Your guys' job is to maintain that source coming in. You guys are monitoring for that, looking for 0-day attacks, other people sharing information saying, we just got attacked, here's what it looked like. All right. Most people don't like to post that stuff. But the problem is if you don't share it with somebody else won't share it with you. Right. So how many of you guys have taken Palo Alto class?
We have that class?
We do. And you're required to take it.
So required to take it?
Yes, sir.
Oh, shit.
You were telling me you were taking it next
Is
semester.
it firewalls?
That's
Yes.
firewall.
Oh, I'm taking that class.
Okay. So those that have taken that class, what is the Palo Alto equivalent of threat intelligence?
It's those patches they push.
It is. What's that service name?
I'm trying to remember.
Wildfire. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So Wildfire is the equivalent of their threat intelligence. And if you guys remember how Wildfire works, it is essentially all the different Palo Altos. When it finds something that is known out there, it ships it up and has a database that is constantly being updated like every minute, so that when there's a thing come through, it can trigger onto other Palos. If you pay for their other cloud services, you can actually host that locally and have it go to that before it goes up to the cloud. So the Wildfire would be Palo Alto's threat intelligence system. As it says in the middle, we just talked about it, threat intelligence sharing and collaboration, making sure that you're doing this so that you guys have a common defense against those adversaries. And then actionable insights, making sure that the ultimate goal is to provide something to do for organizations to empower them to defend themselves. So what kind of sources can we get threat intelligence from? Obviously, we have our internal sources, aka all the information we're gathering on our own network, our external sources, or even commercial threat intelligence feeds as well. Our internal sources would be all of our log data, our SIEMs, our IDSs, IPSs, any of our endpoint protection platforms. Again, all of that is information we pull from our inside. Also, any kind of incident response or forensics analysis that we do, making sure that we keep track of our TTPs. All right, that's another one of those acronyms like IOC that you guys are going to see in the cert, and that's very, very important to this class. Your indicators of compromise and the TTPs are the tactics, techniques, and procedures that are used by those threat actors to get in. You guys should remember that from back in module 1. External, you guys have seen OSINT stuff when we go out to KC, and you guys have played with the OSINT conferences. That's the ability for you to gather information, intelligence from publicly accessible sources like social media, news websites, public forums, and government adversaries or advisories. Security vendor reports that come out. You'll have information sharing platforms like ISACs, Threat Exchange, the dark web monitoring type tools that are out there, and then government law agencies like the CERT, which is the Computer Emergency Response Teams that get out there. You can also have commercial threat intelligence feeds that are paid for. And so many commercial vendors will offer a subscription-based threat intelligence feed that provides organizations with curated, timely, actionable intelligence. Right? That's where you get to pay the big hefty fees. So different types of threat intelligence. Again, you'll have things like strategic threat intelligence, which is often focused on the long-term trends, emerging threats, or broader cybersecurity landscape. The tactical ones are meant to be specific threats or including those indicators of compromise, malware analysis, attack techniques, and vulnerabilities. Your operational threats will be real-time things that come in from immediate threats or security events. And then your technical threat intelligence is focused on the technical details of that. How did they get in? What's the network traffic pattern that they followed and the vulnerability signatures itself? So threat intelligence lifecycle, this is where we get the information coming in. So we start with our collection of information, we process it, we analyze it, we disseminate, apply it, get some feedback or improvement, change our plans or any direction, and then start to cycle back over again. Let's see here, we just talked about all that. So roles of threat intelligence in the SOC itself is to increase our enhanced threat intelligence and detection. You guys would be responsible for this threat intelligence stuff. If you remember all the roles, there could be even just one person that's responsible for all threat intelligence coming into the organization and disseminating that out to all the different members of the SOC team, right? Contextualize incident analysis. This is for us during the deep investigation part. In order to determine what is getting priority or triage, you have to have threat intelligence in order to make those decisions, right? Proactive threat hunting. This is where you can go in and you would attack your own networks to make sure that you guys are staying and maintaining patches and things going through there. And your incident response and remediation. This is where you can clean things up, particularly where your facilities of your post-incident analysis and your forensic investigations will provide information for you. So those threat intelligence feeds, one of the main ones you guys have played with would be like your OSINT type stuff, doing proprietary research, collaborative information sharing networks. Most people are going to pay for these commercial feeds, all right? You're going to have some open source feeds if you guys have ever played with things like Tenable or Green, what do they call that now? Used to be Nessus. They now have a different name for that, but those are ones that you can get open source feeds on. That's what you guys will play with in this class. So when you guys are getting those open source feeds so that you can see what's going on, the problem is they're usually behind in times. They're somewhat okay, but they don't have near the specifics of a commercial feed, right? Community source feeds, these will be ones that are part of an information sharing organization. They write them out where they are in a standard and can be consumed by multiple people. And then the government itself would share out and publish threat intelligence feeds about national security threats and critical infrastructure vulnerabilities. So the content of what these look like in your indicators of compromise, this would be like IP addresses that are known to be bad, domain names, file hashes, email addresses, or any other kind of artifacts known for malicious activity. In those malware signatures, this would be something that would be like hashes or patterns that uniquely identify them. Vulnerability information, for example, their CVE numbers or identifiers, their severity ratings and patch availability, and then their tactical and strategic analysis, which is more of the reports and summaries of those attacks that have happened. So integration and consumption, you would try your best to bring these into your SIGN platform. And the reason for that is your SIGN platform does what? There's one word that is always associated with the SIGN.
Automation.
Nope.
Is it events?
It has to do with events. What are you trying to do with events with a SIGN?
Monitor.
Log.
That's all happening in the background. You guys could do that individually, right? You could go out to every single one of those and monitor logs and do all that. What's the hard part?
Bring it all together.
Okay, and what are you trying to do when you bring it all together? There's
Develop a pattern.
a pattern. What's another word for that with a C?
Collect.
Nope.
Corroborate.
Closer.
Correlate?
Correlate. The whole point of a SIME is to correlate things. All right. And it's key that you know that word. If you think of the one word of SIME, remember correlate. And the whole idea there is that you're trying to correlate all these different sources from a bunch of different places, but it's meaningless unless you can correlate why this system is having this log with this system having the log. That's correlation. All right. So the whole point of a SIME is to bring all those sources together and either do correlation through manual entry, or they'll do things like in the new ones, machine learning, AI intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. That's how it tries to sit there and constantly correlate events happening from one system as a reflection of an event on another system. And if you guys remember, logs and time and network time protocol, all of that is important in order for that correlation to actually happen. If you've ever tried to correlate something manually with a bunch of different individual logs, you know exactly how hard that is. And we talked about that, right? You have logs on both the local devices, and then you build a SIME where you're sending all the logs to this as a source of truth of information, right? Because I can manipulate, if I get into a server, I can manipulate the logs. But if my logs are constantly being shipped off to a centralized service, the chances of those logs being modified at the center course is probably significantly harder, right? Don't necessarily trust the logs on the end device, trust the device that is holding all the logs. So back to your word automation and things. Yes, it is the automated consumption of these threat intelligence feeds that enables you to correlate that incoming information with existing security telemetry and then enrich that with security alerts and additional context of what may be going on. And then you could automate response systems based off predefined rules and policies. But the whole idea is to correlate all that incoming data into one spot. All right. Evaluation and selection. When you would select these intelligence feeds, organizations should consider factors such as the relevance of that information. In other words, you guys building out your SOC here, do you really care about critical infrastructure feeds from the government?
Absolutely.
You should. Isn't Wolf Creek still open there?
I'm talking about the SOC that you guys are building in the classroom.
Oh, my mistake.
No. I forgot about Wolf Creek.
Yep, Wolf Creek's still eventually there. It'd be nice if we had multiple Wolf Creeks, but that's a different question. Does anybody in here not know what Wolf Creek is?
I was about to ask, what is that?
That's the nuclear facility that we use for power. It's our nuclear power facility out
But
in
it's,
eastern Kansas.
yeah.
Is it
In high
close to
school,
here?
we had to do it.
Is it what?
Is it close to here?
No, it's eastern Kansas.
It's a ways away.
But my high school, we did a tour of it.
Yep. It is a quote unquote very clean source of energy.
Hasn't blown up.
And it's lasted what?
It's been forever.
I was gonna say, I know I just read an article the other day about it. It's like, is it 50, 60 years we're into it? Something like that.
We should have about 4 of them.
Yeah, if we had 4 of them, we wouldn't need any of these quote unquote windmills. Our prices for electricity would be super low, provided that electricity stayed in the state and didn't get piped out to everybody else.
Like Arizona, we built the turbine.
Yeah, exactly. So what I was going with there is you want to be selective on those threat intelligence feeds that come in, right? Critical infrastructure is important, but if it's not important to your particular small business that's over here, then you probably don't want to muddy up your feeds with things that would come in on critical infrastructure, because that just puts more data into your feeds. You then have to decide, is that really relevant to me or not? You want to filter out the intelligence feeds that aren't relevant to you. Also the quality there again, if you're using all the community source ones, who's to say that I'm not piping false community service stuff to hide the stuff that I'm bringing in, right? So if I set up a signature that says it's blocking this, but the signature is completely wrong, do I really trust that particular data that's coming in there? The timeliness of it, open source feeds, you're probably not getting near zero time type information coming in there. and then the reputation of that feed provider. So all concepts. Now, this is where you have money, right? If you want the good stuff, you got to pay for the good stuff. Pretty much like everything. On the sharing and collaboration, this is why so many big institutions will go through and share information across each other as to the feeds that come in and the different insights that come in there. So when we have talked about other ones here, for example, the ISPs will work with the energy sector providers, which will work with the KBI, right? Here in Kansas as a relevance to us here locally. They all share information. Now, do you think the KBI shares the same amount of information that maybe the power company does? That's correct. The answer is no. Based off history and knowing what I see, the answer is no. It's kind of a one-way street. Sometimes they'll feed information back, but it's kind of a one-way street. But by having that in there, you're also going to get the information from them when there is things that need to be attached. And you need to be looking out for on the critical infrastructure side, you would then have that information. And I only say that from peers that have worked in those industries. Different types of sharing this information, either through bilateral, sharing it both directions, or you have ties with trusted partners. It could be a one-to-one exchange in the industry. Most of the information you're sharing is just those indicators of compromise, malware samples, incident reports, things like that. It's not whether or not you got attacked or anything else. This is what we found out with somebody that was trying to attack us. And here's what we found as an indicator of compromise when they did that. They were trying to attack our global protect VPN. And here's how we noticed that they did that through blah, 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 blah. All right. When the big attacks came out several years ago, you had the CrowdStrike one. And before that, there was a really big one against things like Global Protect on Palo Alto. That sharing of information is what protected a lot of people. They could shut down those VPNs quickly when they realized there was an attack going on, right? And or firewalls. Let's see here. The whole benefit of threat intelligence sharing is improved situational awareness, early detection, warning, risk mitigation, and cost reduction of resources. Challenges or considerations there is making sure that they're trustworthy and confidentiality. Obviously, you don't want to be sharing information that's going to be used to get back against you. Any kind of legal or regulatory compliance, particularly if it has any kind of personal identifiable information or sensitive customer data going through there, any kind of technical operability, meaning that it's in a common standard format like STIX or TAXI, which can help exchange that information between different stakeholders, and then any kind of cultural or organizational barriers that you have outside there. I don't think we're going to be sharing a lot with China currently, right? Or Russia. Probably not our two best friends to share cybersecurity information with.
But North Korea.
At least not at the face level. Now, if you don't think we're not doing it behind face level, I'm sure we are. All right. Some tools for this kind of stuff. Let's see. So data ingestion, you're going to use commercial sources or OSINT. This would be your tips, right? So this will be your threat intelligence tools and providers or platforms. And the idea is to integrate and collaborate and share that information with a common dashboard. Malware analysis platforms. These will take static analysis and exam file structures and metadata, doing hashes of the data itself, while dynamic analysis executes the malware into a controlled environment to observe its behavior. So yes, we will actually take that malware, deploy it into, say, a VM or a container or something that is completely sandboxed, and then see what happens when that gets deployed. Okay. These platforms monitor malware samples for suspicious behaviors, for file modifications, network communications, and system calls to identify malicious activity. This is where your EDRs will really come in, your endpoint detection systems. So for example, like we use Sophos here on campus, right? That thing is sitting there grabbing all the Windows logs, all the logins, anything that comes in the system, but it's also doing a hash of every single file on that system. If that file is making changes, it reports that information back to a centralized source so that I can see if you're making changes on your laptop or if changes are happening on your laptop that you may not be aware of. All of that's getting logged at that point. Now, many of you can understand where that is a total pain, right? So what does that do to a system?
Box it way down.
Yeah, it bogs it way down, right? Because it's having to calculate those hashes. If you're doing something where you're creating several thousand small files, it's got to calculate hashes on every single one of those files and then submit them up.
Really anything.
Yep. The logs can be bigger than the files, so to speak. Let's see here. Open source intelligence tools. These are used to gather intelligence from publicly available sources. And these will collect their information. We can use them to analyze things. What do we use OSINT for the most?
In what regard?
Monitoring.
What's that?
I think like gathering like.
Like, why would we use OSINT in the cybersecurity?
Indications and warnings.
Yeah, you could use them in indications and warnings.
But a lot of it's research too,
Research of what?
like current threats that are like broadcast or like open threat,
Yep.
like CVEs and things like that are published.
Yep.
Could also be about the actors themselves, like different groups and organizations.
Yeah, what are they usually trying to do when they're out there gathering OSINT?
Trying to find issues with the human factor of security.
Yeah, you got it. So it's usually targeted in order for us to pull off certain types of attacks, right? So Gage Giffen is the director of blah, blah, blah. I'm going to do everything I can to collect all the information about him. And then I would do things like spear phishing campaigns or something like that in order to get him to click on a link so I can get into his system. That's usually the key for things like OSINT. That's why we're gathering information about those individuals. You could use it in that fashion. You could then slip that information into a conversation when you're one-on-one in a bar and they just happen to be sitting there. Right? And as we all know, these systems can be super protected, but the individuals, it's only as good as you can get your individual employees to be. And those are by far the weakest link.
No. Free RTX 5090. Just click here.
Just click here. Yeah. Or, $500 gift card if you're a comp sci professor. All right. Vulnerability management platforms. Darn it, that's now recorded. Oh, well.
You didn't name it, James.
Just clip that out.
Help organizations identify, prioritize, and remediate. We're going to skip right past that. These are there to perform those vulnerability scans, right? So what kind of tools would you use for vulnerability management platforms? You guys remember the names of some of those tools? We just talked about them a minute ago. You all have Google, use Google.
You're saying Nessus.
Yeah, Nessus would be one. What's some other common ones out there? Nessus Tenable.
Green, whatever.
Yep, what's the green whatever? Type in green vulnerability scanner. What do you get?
You said green?
Green, yeah, I can't remember the full name of it. It's escaping me.
Managing.
It's green something.
Greenbone.
Greenbone, that's it. And Greenbone used to be what?
If my internet was working.
You got a cable in front of me. Just remember, I see everything. I know they do, but
I have a VPN I would turn on.
you think that matters.
Wait, you're saying a VPN doesn't?
Not if we're decrypting SSL. What?
I actually didn't hear what you said. I was like stretching, my ears got numb.
I said, not if we're decrypting the SSL. So Greenbone, what was
Open vulnerability assessment system.
Yep. There was a name for it.
Open
OpenVAS.
OpenVAS, that's it. Thank you. So yeah, OpenVAS. See, I'm the old school and remember all the old names. I don't have the new fancy names that they have. But yeah, OpenVAS was one of the big ones that people could deploy for free. It was baked right into Kali kind of thing. I think it still is, but you get the Greenbone Community Edition or something like that now. And some students did a lot of research with that here just last spring and ran into a ton of issues. As a matter of fact, they did like a patch update and it blew up the entire community system side of it, right as he was about to do testing across everything on campus. So They're again, trusted resources, right? He was just doing it as a test to go a couple laptops here. If you were using that in your company and downloaded the update, it would have trashed your entire OpenVAS infrastructure. You would have lost all your vulnerability protection. So those threat intelligence pieces, again, this can usually be either feeds or APIs or something to come into the different software that's in there. And they usually have a whole list of sources you can get that information. Dark web monitoring tools, you guys probably have a little bit of this on your credit cards or things like that, searching for your PII information to see if you've been compromised out there. Those are services that you can pay for there as well. You could also use those tools to crawl the dark web to see if any of your kind of information's out there, stolen credentials, etc. Adversary emulation platforms. These are used to simulate those tactics, techniques, and procedures used by real-world threat actors to help the organization go through there. Good ones of this would be look up things like, it's not napalm. It'll come to me. I needed way more Monster this morning. It's not napalm. What's the name of that? Impact, Core Impact. So go look up Core Impact sometime and you can kind of see the cool tools that are out there that people use as the red team to try to attack. Obviously, I don't know the newer versions of Core Impact. I know it from, dare I say, 20 years ago, 18 years ago kind of thing. But that was probably the absolute coolest tool that I've ever seen in my time. And yes, it was 18 years ago. That was back before you had AI and all this other cool stuff that we use a lot today. It had a little bit of machine learning, but not a lot back then. But you literally dropped it on a laptop, dropped it on a network, plugged in, and it scanned everything on the network, found out what it was vulnerable on, exploited it, and gave you a terminal prompt to all the machines.
This is called what?
Core Impact.
I believe it's paid.
No, it's definitely paid, and it's definitely expensive. To the tune of several tens of thousands of dollars, or I think the business itself could be much higher than that.
So like Fortra or security pricing.
But it was literally that exciting. Like we plugged it in here on the school network and all of a sudden we got terminals to every server all over campus. It was pretty, we accidentally plugged it in the wrong network. I stick by that, that we plugged it into the wrong network and it went to campus wide.
Hear that YouTube AI? Wrong
It,
network.
it was pretty eye-opening to say the least, because that's where not only did it go out and just start fingering everything out there and then coming back, it also turned around and, like I said, gave us either shell prompts. It dumped the entire LDAP database for the university at that point in
Yeah,
time.
I know what this is now.
Yep. You should.
That sounds really familiar.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, when we dumped the entire LDAP, and that was back when NTLM was the main security of passwords, which means you only had to have 7 characters and chop that up and use rainbow tables. Just so happened that we have all those rainbow tables on hand, and we were able to dump the passwords of everybody on campus in seconds. So not only would we dump their hashes from compromising it, but then we could then translate those hashes into real passwords in just seconds.
That must have been a fun conversation.
It was.
Did it give you access to the never mind, I can't say much.
Yeah. So I won't go any further than that, but that was an accident when we plugged it in the wrong network. And in this case, it truly was an accident, because in our old lab, when we had that set up, you either had a white jack, a black jack, or a blue jack on the desk. And if you plugged it in the wrong one, one was the campus network, one was the internal network that we had set up for this system. They purely just plugged it into the wrong jack kind of thing. And we forgot to disable all those before that training event. So, but before we could stop it, we were getting alarms all over campus, right? That the purpose of what you see here and everything we're talking about, a bunch of alarms went off because we saw it sourcing from one IP address trying to attack all this infrastructure. The problem was, yes, they could shut it down, and they did shut it down, but it's the amount of information we got in a very short amount of time. So really, really cool tool. There's a bunch of them out there now that just blow that stuff away. I just read the other day where Kali now is baking in its own LLM inside of it. And so one of it is for Nmap. So Nmap has its own LLM that somebody created, and now it's being baked right into Kali. So you could just talk to the LLM and it will spit off all the Nmap attacks and bring back that information that you're trying to acquire. Pretty cool what they're coming up with now. There was a day where we had things called script kiddies. And nowadays, everybody's a script kiddie, right? And now that we can use AI, you don't even have to be a script kiddie. In those days, there was no scripts, right? So Kali was called Backtrack, and Backtrack was just a slew of tools. You had no clue how to use those tools, and there wasn't a whole lot of help information. It wasn't like you can go, quote, read the documentation. It didn't exist. Then all of a sudden, now you load up Kali, and there's all these examples with all these different scripts, and you don't even have to know what the tool does. You just point it and shoot it. That just didn't exist in those old days. All right. Introduction on the threat hunting. Why does it feel like it started all over again? Oh, that was threat intelligence. Now we're threat hunting. Okay. So this is your proactive cybersecurity approach in order to aim at identifying and mitigating those potential threats, AKA you guys are going to be the red team doing your own testing against the organization, right? Call it the purple team, because you guys are not only trying to figure out what the threats are on your own network, but you're also out there trying to protect them. And therefore you're going to have a mix of red team and blue team. So the proactive approach is to send these guys out and do some things against the antivirus measures or firewalls, try to see if we trigger security alerts, that kind of thing, in order for us to see what's going on. It's a continual process. Threat hunting is not a one-time activity, but it should be performed at different intervals throughout the time and on an ongoing basis. Data-driven analysis, we should be taking the information that we get out of those large volumes of data and using that to detect any kind of anomalies or suspicious activity going on. And then some kind of contextual understanding, making sure that we understand what the organization's environment is, the industry trends, any kind of threat that's going to help the threat hunters differentiate between normal and abnormal behavior coming through. If you remember those jobs that we were talking about with that employer that was looking specifically at this class, they do allow you to go do some threat hunting in that. So even as a SOC 1 analyst, you will do some threat hunting in that type job anyway. You could use your hypothesis driven, which is just where you have an idea or assumption about what's going on with those TTPs, and you could test to see if that's true. You could do some manual or automated techniques. Now, if you can remember, like I was talking about core impact, right? That was extremely noisy on the network. It was very easily to be detected. Now, if you had set that up to just sit there and run in the background over 30 days, 90 days, it's not going to reach as much of a suspicious activity. As a matter of fact, if you could filter enough of that traffic into the network, what do you think would change? So we always have to set up a what when we set up a network and we set up one of these tools, like a sign. Starts with a B.
You say again?
We set up what when we set up a sign? It starts with a B on the network. It's how we determine baseline, right? We got to set up what is baseline network traffic so that when we see an anomaly, we know something happened. But if I'm slowly ingesting a bunch of this kind of threat actor type traffic on the network, what am I doing? Changing the baseline. So therefore it doesn't get as detected as much as long as I do it over time, right? Think of like your brute force attacks. You guys have those tools. What's the tool for stopping brute force attacks? There's a really common one out there. You guys
using Windows event, failed logins.
There's that, but there's actually a tool for blocking IPs when they come into me. What's that tool called?
You're pointing at us like we've done it.
Oh yeah, you have. I know you did because you guys talked about it. What's the name of that tool? Rah.
I'm trying to remember.
Do a search for IP blocking. There's a tool that you guys have used for that. You set it up commonly on your servers. What's that?
A firewall.
Well, it
Oh, you're talking like an actual tool.
no ban IP. What's that one called?
Yeah.
What's that?
Cloudflare is what pops up.
Cloudflare would be there. It's the ban IP one. What's that called? It's a simple Linux package.
Yeah, I think it was an OpenSense extension.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a common Linux package, but it can be built into your firewall. I'm trying to remember what that one's called.
CPU.
Something to do with ban IP or no IP. The reason I'm having you guys do this search, guess what you're doing for the next 2 weeks? This kind of stuff, right? So you guys got to go find all these tools to implement.
Sounds hard.
That's what the employer was wanting to know the most of. Can you do the effective research? So if you do Google searching for banning IP addresses, what kind of tools do you come up with? Mine's definitely fried, that's why. There should be a
It's a Linux package.
usually, yeah. It's often baked in. It's like, in other words, if you try to attack me,
To ban,
Yeah.
what was it?
yeah.
fail to ban.
Fail to ban, that's it. So fail to ban would be one of those that would do that type of activity where, you know, if you're failing your logins and you set it like 5 times, for example, right? Then it goes ahead and bans you for X amount of time. I mean, this is baked into the cheap Linux routers that you go get at Walmart, right? The concept and the package is baked in there. You can obviously tweak that. Like you may want to ban them forever. Well, that may not necessarily work. What if somebody just forgot their password 5 times in a row, right? We can't remember the name of a package. How am I supposed to remember my password? So you may set it for like 30 minutes and then it opens it back up. Well, that means when I'm sitting there attacking you, I have to figure out what those are, which are usually your IDS, IPS rules, right? Your firewall rules. And you guys does anybody know what you call when you test the firewall rules to see what's available? There's a cyber term for that.
Testing
What's that?
or testing.
No. See, hint is firewall.
Like port scanning.
It's like port scanning, but what do they call it when it's against a firewall? You can Google it.
My internet just really isn't.
I'm not trying to be stubborn. I want you guys to be able to look up these terms because you're going to see this term later and be like, I have no idea what that is. And then you realize, yeah, I do. We literally did that class kind of thing. There's a specific term for doing like port scanning on a firewall. Because on a firewall, you're not necessarily wanting to do ports. You're trying to figure out the rules of a firewall because most of them are zone-based or rule-based firewalls now.
It just says firewall audio.
If I was to do a bunch of steps in this classroom, I would be,
An axe scan?
okay. So walking and firewall. Firewalking. There you go. So when you're doing any kind of scans like that on a firewall, you may see the terminology of firewalking. And the whole idea there is you're sitting there poking the firewall to see what would go through and what wouldn't go through, right? You're not really attacking it. You're just trying to get an idea of what rules are out there so that you can plan an attack later down the road. So with you guys using Kali and stuff like that, you know, the first one is your information gathering. That's the first thing that pops up. What is that called? The category in tools available on Deal. And one of those is called Firewalker, if I remember right.
Yeah, there's a tool in Kali called Firewalk.
Firewalk, that's it. Yep. So that's what you would use to test your OpenSense or your PFSense. And so you guys that are deploying those in your house, you should use Firewalk against it, both from the inside and the outside, to see what you're exposing, because that is what a threat actor would actually go and do. That is threat hunting. You're threat hunting your own exact network. That's the first tool you would do to do something against your own firewall. And so if you don't think that won't be what the red team does against your guys' SOC environment, right? It's the reason I'm bringing this up is because they're going to be using those tools coming out of there. All right. Sorry, didn't mean to go down a tangent, but again, this is all stuff you guys are going to see when they're coming in and trying to do attacks. So techniques for doing that kind of stuff is to systematically look and search for signs of malicious activity or those indicators of compromise, and make sure your potential threats may evade traditional security utilities. Literally all the same words that we've used all along here. The methodologies in which they will do that is by a hypothesis. They have an idea of how they're going in, or a historical incident, or some kind of industry specific knowledge in order to develop some thought about what a likely attack scenario might happen. In the Diamond model, it's a threat intelligence framework that helps organizations analyze their threats by considering 4 key elements: the adversary, the infrastructure, the capability, and the victim. All right. So remember, Diamond model correlates to adversary, infrastructure, capability, and victim. Hint, hint, wink, wink, probably on a quiz or a cert. All right. Let's see here. The cyber kill chain. This is probably the most popular one you guys will hear about. As a matter of fact, there's an entire framework listed around this, and there is attack vectors based off this particular hunting methodology. Lots of cyber insurances base their stuff based off the cyber kill chain stuff. So it's a concept developed by Lockheed Martin that describes the steps of a cyber attack. It starts with initial reconnaissance and goes all the way to the exfiltration of data itself. All right. Those threat hunters are going to use that kill chain as a framework for understanding and visualizing the various stages of an attack and identifying those opportunities to detect and disrupt activity. If you were to look at the stages of the cyber kill chain, you'll notice it's very similar to the categories you see at Cali on the left-hand side of the different tools. Right? Starting with initial reconnaissance is the first one is what? It's like network scanning and.
So I know it's like click and there's like tab.
Yeah. You have all those columns in the start menu. That is designed to follow the cyber kill chain.
Okay.
All the way to I want to extract data out of the system kind of thing.
Okay.
So pretty common one there. And then you also have the OODA loop, which is the observe, orient, decide and act. And that's a decision-making framework developed by the military strategist John Boyd that emphasizes the importance of rapid decision-making and agility in the response to changing situations. All right. Another common framework you guys will see is the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And you guys should be familiar with these as this is the kind of stuff that your employers will be asking about, all right? So the MITRE ATT&CK framework is your adversarial tactics, techniques, and common knowledge framework. And it's just a base, knowledge base of adversary behaviors and tactics used in the real world. You will get all those TTPs or those tactics, techniques, and procedures that are observed behaviors when you're doing attacks. If you leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework, threat hunters can then prioritize threat hunting activities, develop detection rules, and improve their understanding of an adversary behavior and technique. In other words, we may do a very simple attack on you just to see how you react. All right. Then we do another attack. We just see how you react. Benign attacks, something like failed login attempts on fail to ban, right? Do you have anything in place? If I attack your system with 1,000 requests at once, do you block me? Does your system not block me? Do I have to sit there and feed it real slowly in order to send these attacks? The reason I would test that is when I mount a final attack and say, for example, I can send 10,000 requests to your server. I want to do that because it's a whole lot faster than sitting there trying to do one at a time per second or one every 10 seconds. The cross-industry standard process for data mining, that's a widely used methodology for data mining and analytics projects that involve 6 phases: the business understanding, the data understanding, data preparation, modeling, evaluation, and development. All right. Let's see here. Role of those SOC hunting operations in that proactive threat detection. This is for you guys to protect it. By doing and identifying and mitigating those security risks before they escalate into significant events. Enhanced incident response. This is when you guys actually find something and make sure that you can leverage those findings and intelligence through the prioritization of alerts, triage the incidents, and then take appropriate action. Continuous improvement in those environments is updating your detection rules, things like that when you do have incidents that come in. Leveraging the threat intelligence for the hunting side of things. This will help you define your objectives and hypothesis, select relevant threat intelligence sources, and then enrich your telemetry through threat intelligence. You'll develop detection rules and signatures. A lot of times you guys will use a feed for this, but you can also create your own detections. In our environment, that would be something like snort rules. So when you guys are building out your SOC environment, you may end up developing your own snort rules as you go through there. Search for indicators of compromise. This would be using our threat intelligence as a guide to search for known IOCs associated with those malwares and command and conquer and control infrastructure, things like that. Analyze behavioral patterns and anomalies, correlate those findings with threat intelligence, and then share insights on your lessons learned. So what kind of tools would you end up using? You would have your threat intelligence platforms. This is used to store and analyze your threat intelligence data. You have our SIEM, which is used to collect and aggregate and analyze that security event data from various sources. We have our EDRs, which are going to provide real-time monitoring, detection, and response on endpoint devices. And then your NTA tools, which is monitoring the network itself. This may be your IDS, IPS, that kind of stuff. Look down here on this last line. This is going to give you an example of what those services may be. So on a threat intelligence platform, you may have something like Threat Connect, Anomaly, Threat Stream, Recorded Future, probably very expensive tools as you go through there. None of those raise a bell for me. On your SIEM, you obviously have Splunk, which is the king of all the SIEMs that are out there. You'll also have things like IBM QRadar, ArcSight, Logarithm is another common one that's out there. On your EDRs, this is like CrowdStrike. Remember, this is the CrowdStrike issue that happened. They compromised that EDR and it took down all sorts of systems, right? Carbon Black is a real common one. I believe that's a VMware product, right? Is Carbon Black VMware?
Yes.
Okay. Making sure my knowledge hasn't failed me. Microsoft Defender for endpoint. You guys may have seen Microsoft Defender. This is just a business sense that actually ships those logs all the way back. NTA tools would be something like Darktrace, Vector AI, Cisco's Stealth Watch, and Extra Hop Reveal. Malware analysis platforms. This would be something that would help your security analysts analyze and dissect malware itself. You guys may see something like Cuckoo Sandbox, Joe Sandbox. Keep some of those names in mind. Maybe one of those would be something that we could use in our SOC. You're a user in an entity behavior analysis or your UBA solutions. This would be something like Splunk's user behavioral, Exabeam, Securonix, or even Rapid7's Insight IDR. By the way, VirusTotal is a really good one for your malware stuff. Has anybody ever used their tool for doing detection? If not, pull up VirusTotal in Google once. So what that allows you to do is upload a file that you think is suspicious, and it would go through and scan that file in a safe sandbox and then trying to bring back whether or not there's any kind of malware in there. It's a really slick tool for you guys as IT professionals to use to see if there's viruses or something common with it, especially if your computer doesn't detect it, but VirusTotal detects it. There's either A, no signature for it on your platform, or your platform may have been compromised to ignore that type of file coming through. Open source intelligence tools. Anybody ever seen Multigo? Should. It's in the Kali platform. So if you haven't played with it, go play with it in the Kali platform. Anybody remember what Shodan is? I know you know Shodan. Does anybody else remember Shodan? You should know Shodan.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you did a club talk over Shodan. So Shodan is a giant search engine that has basically cataloged every device that's out there, IoT type device, and it allows you to collect a bunch of information out there as well. So if you have a bunch of IP cameras and things like that on the internet, you can go out there and literally do a search, and I can pull your IP address for your IP camera at your house. If you put it on a publicly facing network. It's not the best thing to do. Spiderfoot and then Recon NG. Recon NG, if I recall, is actually part of Kali as well. Is that correct? On a Google search. This one down here. And I say this because those are probably the 3 tools that you guys can use for free for doing your OSINT stuff.
Yeah, it's Kali.
Okay, thought so. Deception techniques. This would be where you can deploy decoy systems and things like that. Does anybody know what another name for a decoy is on the network?
Canary.
What's that?
I use Canary.
Yep, Canary. Setting up honeypots, that kind of thing, so that you can get people to attack and get alerts off that kind of stuff. These are ones that are out there that are available as well.
Or the text file that says passwords for
Yeah, literally the text file that says
passwords.
passwords. All right, so that's kind of the goal of our threat intelligence and threat hunting. You guys will need to be able to collect this information. You guys will be able to need to use and leverage some of those tools that we talked about in these last 2 slides here in order to come back and set up our SOC here in the next 2 weeks. All right. So out of these, make sure you guys kind of remember these last tools and that you guys can go search that kind of stuff out. At the end of the day, in our big project, you guys will be selecting the tools we deploy and actually deploying them. Okay. Given that we're trying to set up a SOC in like 2 to 3 weeks, it's going to require everybody do some little piece in there. And that'll be the point that we'll talk about when we get that far. All right. Anybody have any questions over module 7? Again, next week will be module 8. If you're looking to see what module 8 actually is, that's not what I wanted. It is our incident response and handling. So at that point, that's where we're talking about what we're going to do once you guys find an incident going through there.
This may be a part of next week, as you just mentioned, but a part of the intelligence cycle, I would imagine that we would be sharing information that we find with reputable sources. Is there a part of the cycle with that, or is it mostly just kind of internal?
No, you would be sharing outside. So that would be that external thing that we just went over in the threat intelligence side of the house, is being able to share that information out once you've got it logged.
So depending on who you're sharing it with, a lot of times you have standing meetings. Right. And you'll say, okay, we're going to do our stand up on Tuesday after Patch Tuesday.
Yep.
To go over like what did patch, like if we found something at Patch Tuesday, whatever, and then you'll say, no, it didn't solve our problem. And then it goes, you communicate that with like the right people and it gets to the right people. But usually when you have an intelligence briefing, it's standardized, it's scheduled, and then you also have a reporting mechanism where you might have a schedule where you just do random reporting. But whatever position you have, there's a procedure in place for the appropriate authorities to receive it.
Yep.
And often that's classified in its own right.
Especially if it's within the government entities.
Yeah, because like you don't want your adversary to know when your stand-up is. So just to be aware, like you would have a regular rhythm that is random. I used to do those briefings with Platinum. I used to receive them and then pass them along to the writers. They're very boring, by the way.
Until they're not.
Until Salt Typhoon happens.
All right, we'll stay with our standard approach. You guys will go off and do your lab. If you have questions on the lab, we can cover that on Thursday. Thursday, we will cover our quiz. Anybody have any questions over that? Cool. We'll see you on Thursday.